All right, how you all doing out there? It's a beautiful fall morning here. I just figured I ought to start this live stream by playing my theme song. And perhaps many of you have only heard just this little little bit, but I just thought I'd play the whole thing just for fun. That's actually out of a collection of short piano pieces that I wrote for intermediate piano students called Miniatures, and still have a few copies of that CD left. Anyway, if I look a little bit scruffy this morning, it's because right after this live stream, I'm got to go out and do some yard work. That's what you have to do when you're a homeowner. I got some overgrown rhododendrons and a gardening bed to clear out for my wife, and we're going to be setting up our new generator. Got all kinds of fun stuff to do around the house today. But I thought I'd come on this morning just to share a few things with you. Over the last few weeks, of course, it's been quite eventful around here, as you can imagine. And I've received a lot of concerned messages, phone calls. In fact, I just got a message from one of the deacons at our church, just checking up on everybody in the church, just to see how we're all doing. And I think that's really great. So I'll be calling him back after the live stream before I go out and do all my yard work. By the way, I'm Leon Ogin. This is At Home with Music's live stream. I'm hoping to do this at least once a week or maybe twice a month. We'll see how it goes. But I just wanted to give you an update on how we're doing now after the big storm. Recovery now is in full swing. And I must admit, there are certain parts of town that I have yet to go into because I just don't know if I want to see the destruction that has taken place. But I know that rebuilding is going on at a furious pace. There's a whole bunch of crews out on the Appalachian Trail, which we're very close to here, and Mountains to Sea Trail and the Hard Times Trail, all the different hiking trails there are out here. There's a lot of them. And of course, work continues to clear the Blue Ridge Parkway. Parts of it in Virginia, I believe a large section of it in Virginia is now open, but there are still sections here in Buncombe County, North Carolina, that are closed. They're still cleaning up the trees that fell across the road, and unfortunately, whole sections of the road just were washed away. And that's a road, of course, that because we only live about a 5-minute, 10-minute drive away from the Blue Ridge Parkway, we frequently go up there just to enjoy the beautiful view. And in fact, at this time of year, it becomes really spectacular with the fall colors. But anyway, how did we do through the Hurricane Helene? Well, I remember the first night, it was the 27th of September. That's when the storm started coming through. And we lost power somewhere in the middle of the night, maybe 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And that was it. We didn't have any power. And unfortunately, because we're on a well system here, we also didn't have any water. But we had stored up a whole bunch of water, drinking water and so forth. So we weren't going to go thirsty, but we had no idea how long we were going to be without power. And of course, we were also without internet. And I think some of the cell towers were damaged or put out of commission. And so we had no way to contact anybody anywhere. we couldn't send texts. We couldn't call any. Well, I don't know. We never tried to call anybody. Maybe we could have called some folks. I don't think we could, though. I don't think we had cell service even. Anyway, we were isolated for 2-3 days in our darkened house. And we looked out, and we have 2 driveways. We've got one on the upper level and then one down below where we actually can put our cars. Yes, we can still put our cars in the garage. That's pretty amazing. Fortunately, they were in the garage, and so they were not damaged in any way by the storm. But unfortunately, the flooding was not an issue because, as many of you know, we live up on one of the mountains here in Asheville. So we didn't get flooded, although we certainly got a lot of rain. And what happened, as many of you know, is there were 3 days of just rain, constant rain. Then the hurricane came through, or of course, by the time it got to us, it was a tropical storm. But nevertheless, it dumped 20 inches at least of rain on us after the previous rains had dumped maybe 10 inches. I mean, it was a lot of rain. So we had rivers running down our street from up here on the mountain. And unfortunately, that all went down into the lower lying areas. Asheville is kind of like inside of a giant bowl almost. Biltmore Village, an area that we've enjoyed many times while we've lived here, was completely flooded. Many of the shops and things were destroyed, flooded out. And it's just a horrifying thing to see. I'm sure you can find a lot of videos that show the just massive destruction. The whole arts district, River Arts District, was practically underwater. Now they're going to rebuild. The rebuilding is already taking place, but it's going to take a long time, and it's never really going to be the same. They'll rebuild it. Things will come back, but it's going to be different than the way it used to look. And out in the surrounding areas, in the small towns throughout the Appalachian Mountains, whole little towns were just destroyed. A lot of folks were talking about how Chimney Rock was just wiped away. Well, Chimney Rock is still there, and they are planning to rebuild. Very popular place. In fact, we visited Chimney Rock many years ago when we used to come to Asheville on vacation. But anyway, our power went out. We had a gigantic treetop, couple of treetops land in our driveway, because even though we didn't get flooded up here, we certainly got the wind. And we may have even had a tornado come through here because it literally tore the tops off of some of the trees. We're actually in the Pisgah National Forest. And so some of the tops of the trees were torn off and landed in our driveway. So our driveway was covered in treetop. So our job for the next couple of days was to go out there and saw all that up and try to clear that out. Fortunately, we had a very kind neighbor from down the street a little ways. He came up with his chainsaw. I guess some folks had come by, and as they were surveying the damage, noticed us laboriously sawing away at these 2 giant treetops, thinking, how are we going to cut this all up? I've got a chainsaw, but it's an electric chainsaw, and it's just not nearly as powerful as a gas-powered chainsaw. So anyway, kind neighbor came up and cut up the big pieces for us, and now we have enough firewood to last us for 2 or 3 winters. Unfortunately, we don't have a fireplace. So anyway, but we managed to get that all cleared out. But after a while, we realized that it was going to be quite some time before we got power back or internet. And we both, my wife and I both, need the internet for our work. It's obvious that I do, because how else am I going to post my videos? And my wife, her job requires her to be online. So we decided to take the only road out of town that was still passable, and we drove down to Shelby, which is about an hour and a half south of us, sort of south, still in North Carolina, and we went to our daughter's house. And our daughter and her partner were kind enough to put us up for almost, well, it was over a week. We were there. We went down on Monday after the storm, and we were there until the following Tuesday. Not just the next day, but a week later, 8 days later. So my wife was able to go to work. So she and our daughter worked side by side for a week because our daughter is a telecommuter. She's able to work anywhere there's internet, and they got their power back way before we did. So we were able to come down there and hang with them. Unfortunately, on the way down to Shelby, I started feeling a tickle in my throat. And I thought, oh, I'm just thirsty. I'm dehydrated. We've been working hard trying to clean up the mess left after the storm. I'll be okay. I wasn't. I started going downhill really fast. And unfortunately, I had the flu. Tested for COVID, which probably hardly anybody's doing anymore these days, but turns out I didn't have COVID, but I definitely had something similar. Sore throat, achiness, can't move, just kind of. So I spent the whole week just trying to recover. And during that time, my wife and daughter came back up here to the house and did some more cleanup. We had, of course, unfortunately, food in the freezer that was now inedible and dead. And they ended up with several bags of trash. And we thought, well, gosh, we don't know if anybody's going to even collect this trash. If we put spoiled food out, well, the bears, which are still active, they're going to have a field day. So our very kind-hearted daughter said, oh, Mom, just put them in the car and put them in our trash down in Shelby. And so that's what they did. So anyway, we were very well taken care of. And we're very, very fortunate. We consider ourselves among the most fortunate because our power came back on that following Monday. We had some friends who still didn't have water. They were able to come over here and do some laundry because when the power came back on, our water came back on because our well pump started working again. And so once again, we had water. It's filtered. Our well was not flooded. So there's a pretty good chance that the water is still good. We're having it tested and we'll find out. But we also have one of those little drinking water filter things that filters out all the bacteria and anything that could be potentially harmful. So we've got plenty of drinking water. A dear friend of ours from Florida was really worried about us. And so she ordered a bunch of drinking water and food and things and had it sent up here. And I guess she ordered it through Amazon or something like that. And they didn't quite get the order right. So part of it was delivered. And so she called Amazon and said, what's going on? Why didn't you deliver it? So, oh, we'll deliver it again. So they ended up delivering the whole order that she made twice. So now we have all kinds of bottled water, which fortunately we were able to give some of it away to folks who still, to this day, do not have drinkable water coming out of their faucets. But like I say, we are very fortunate. Our house was not damaged, although we did lose some tree tops. We've got one tree that is leaning very precariously and starting to come down very slowly. And so we've got a tree surgeon, an arborist, if you like, coming over to get rid of that tree. And another one that fell completely across the road on our property and is, I guess, what they call in hiking terms, a widowmaker, because it could come down completely and land on somebody. But fortunately, our street is not a highly traveled hiking area. So if it comes down, most likely it'll just block the road. Anyway, we're back. We're at full capacity, but a lot of folks around us are still waiting to have good water. Most folks have power back. Duke Energy, that's our company, they did an excellent job getting everybody up and running again. And it had to have been a nightmare for those guys. Just crazy. So we are in the midst of recovery now, and there are still a lot of needs being met. Our church was involved in handing out supplies, still doing that. And my goodness, just so much has happened in the last few weeks. It's almost ironic. I may have mentioned before, can't remember what I've said on live streams or in my videos, but my wife and I lived in Florida for 32 years. We moved there in the winter of 1984, right just before Christmas, actually, of 1984. My wife took a job in Florida, and I took a job in Florida. So because of our new jobs, we went out to Florida, and we lived in Cocoa Beach for a while, and then we lived in Cocoa, and we had no real acquaintance with hurricanes. In California, where we both came from, you had earthquakes, but not hurricanes. Well, it wasn't too long before we were having to evacuate, and we've done that 2-3 times. In fact, we had to evacuate right before we moved to Asheville from Hurricane Matthew, which was heading right for our house. And anyway, we thought, all right, we're going to Asheville. We're through with hurricanes. We're through with all this tropical storm nonsense. Well, unfortunately, that was not the case. But this really was one of those perhaps once in a lifetime events. And so we're really hoping that this won't happen again in our lifetime, and maybe not happen again for 1,000 years. The last time there was a big flood in this area was in 1916. Very similar situation. And this flood apparently was even worse than the 1916 flood, that whole event. But recovery is continuing, and we're very grateful for that. And we've seen so many. We've gotten to know our neighbors, by the way, a little bit better. We did get to know them before. We have one neighbor up the street from us, up higher on the mountain, who had a big get-together a couple of years ago, the Scott Mountain get-together. And we got to know some of our neighbors in that way. And so we have some really, really great neighbors here, and we're very grateful that we know them. We were able to pull together and help each other out. And anyway, we are back in working hard here, trying to get caught up with everything. And like I say, after this live stream, I got to go out and do a little bit more cleanup from the aftermath of the storm. So that's my hurricane update, and you probably won't be hearing much more about that, because on the regular YouTube videos, we're going back to talking about music. I just started a series on ear training, did the introduction, and also did a video on modulation. And got an interesting comment about that one. Somebody said, I like you the way you teach, but why are you using silly songs like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star and Yankee Doodle Dandy? So, well, somebody requested that I demonstrate the different ways to modulate using Yankee Doodle Dandy. So that's what I did. But if you have any suggestions about what songs you'd like me to use, because you can use popular songs to demonstrate all kinds of musical concepts. You can use them to demonstrate modulation. You can use them to demonstrate transposing, which is another subject that we're going to get into down the road. You can use them to demonstrate technical exercises. There might be a particular run that you want to put into a song, and you can figure out where it can go. There are just like little riffs and things that you can learn, and you can see how you can fit those into a popular song. And of course, you can learn about chord changes. You can learn about how different chords relate to one another, how some chord progressions sound really smooth and others are kind of jarring, all kinds of different things. And, you can even talk about how the melody is written. That's another area that we want to get into down the road, is analyzing melodies. Why is it that some songs have a melody that really sticks with you? I mean, there are some songs you only have to play 3 notes. Those of you who are my age and older know that that's the first 3 notes of a famous song called Misty. It's very recognizable. But then other songs, you hear them and you can't remember them after you've heard them. But songs with strong melodies, they just stick in your mind. If you play something like this. Well, if you're a Beatles fan, you know immediately, even if I just play you know that I'm playing Eleanor Rigby. Ah, look at all the lonely people. I mean, the Beatles were masters of melody, especially Paul McCartney. But even John Lennon could come up with some good ones. See. That's from In My Life. Beautiful song that was mainly written by John Lennon. Anyway, that's a subject for a whole set of videos analyzing melody. So I have one other thing, a couple other things I wanted to share with you. One of my favorite things to do is look up quotes about music. And I found several. Boy, I'm really bright here. The sun is shining through the window there. So part of me looks a little bit angelic, doesn't it? Anyway, some quotes about music that I have found that I wanted to share with you. Some of these I may have shared in some YouTube shorts. I don't do a lot of YouTube shorts. Maybe I'll take some of these when this comes out on video and cut it up and put it on some shorts. But this is from Plato saying, I would teach children music, physics, and philosophy, but most importantly, music. For the patterns in music and all the arts are the keys to learning. That's why I'm so passionate about teaching music, because and I've talked about this in a previous live stream, it connects to everything. Music connects to mathematics. It connects to history. It connects to philosophy. It connects to religion. Anything you can think of, it connects to science. There's a science behind music, why certain sounds are pleasing to our ears and other sounds are harsh and dissonant. So music and all the arts are the keys to learning. Albert Einstein said, if I were not a physicist, I would probably be a musician. And as many of you know, he was. He was a violinist. I often think in music. I live my daydreams in music. I see my life in terms of music. And then Charles Darwin, in his autobiography, said, if I had to live my life over again, I would have made a rule to read some poetry and listen to some music at least once every week. And you know, there is a direct connection between poetry and music. Good poetry has a certain rhythm to it that almost suggests melodies to you. In fact, many of the great composers were songwriters. And where did they get their lyrics? Well, they often drew from the contemporary poetry of the day, or many great composers now go back and find poetry from hundreds of years ago and set that to music. Many of the great pop songwriters started with the poetry and then set it to music. And it's interesting, he mentioned poetry, that is, Darwin mentioned poetry, and now Johann Wolfgang Goethe, a poet, he said a man should hear a little music, read a little poetry, once again, that connection between music and poetry, and see a fine picture. Of course, he wasn't talking about a moving picture like a movie. That didn't exist in his time, but to look at a beautiful piece of art. So hear a little music, read a little poetry, see a fine picture every day of his life in order that worldly cares may not obliterate the sense of the beautiful which God has implanted in the human soul. So I believe that the Lord has created us with an ability to recognize and appreciate and be moved by beautiful sound, beautiful sights, beautiful words. And that's one of the reasons that, once again, I teach people how to produce music themselves. It's one thing to be a consumer of music, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that. I encourage people to listen to music. I listen to music every day. And there's a treasure trove of music here on YouTube. You can listen to all of the Beethoven sonatas, symphonies, concertos. There's a site online where you can listen to literally everything that Bach wrote. I mean, what a treasure trove. You should be listening to this music every day. And I try to do that because it enriches my mind. It increases my appreciation for all things beautiful. And we have several beautiful pictures around our house. My wife is an amateur photographer, and so we've got pictures of the Sierras, beautiful sunsets, and different scenes. Just we try to surround ourselves. Of course, we live in a very beautiful area. I'm looking out past the computer, out the window, and I'm seeing these beautiful fall colors. I can't see my neighbors. All I can see is my little private deck out there and trees. And once the leaves come down, I can see the mountain across the way. It's beautiful, constantly surrounded by beauty. Let's see. Well, anyway, music is the great uniter. This is from Sarah Dessen. An incredible force, something that people who differ on everything and anything else can have in common. So I'm going to take a sip of coffee here, and I got one more thing I want to share with you. I said I was going to talk about hurricanes, which I did, and I'm going to show you a good book. Now, I mentioned how music connects to everything. Music connects to history. There is a series on my channel, a playlist called From Medieval to Modern. And it's sort of an overview of music history. In fact, someday I hope to go back and redo some of those videos because unfortunately, I've mispronounced some names and perhaps got a few of the dates wrong. And that happens sometimes, you know. So try to make some corrections. But nevertheless, that series is still there if you'd like to pursue it. And I'd like to think that my video production skills have gotten a little better since those are some of the early videos I did. At Home with Music was originally designed to be used in homeschools, and it's now evolved into more of a piano tutorial site for older beginners and folks who quit taking piano and want to pick it up again later in life. And that's great, you know. And I just seem to be reaching those folks, you folks perhaps, and I'm very grateful for that. But anyway, this book is called, let me see, I'll put it up there. Hopefully you can see that. Bach, I should make sure I pronounce his name right. Bach, Beethoven, and the Boys. The thing about this is this is not a dry recitation of music history. It's not like a boring college textbook on music history where you're reading it and you're struggling to stay awake at the same time. And I've read books like that because I had to study music history as part of getting my degree in music theory. But I was fascinated by music history. Now, this particular book is written in more of a lighthearted, he doesn't gloss over the fact you will learn music history by reading Bach, Beethoven, and the Boys, but you'll kind of, it's in more of a lighthearted, humorous way. Here, for example, here he's talking about early music. And so this is how the book begins. And there's tons of footnotes in the book that are also very funny. So he starts out, oh, by the way, this book is written by a fellow named David W. Barber. And let's see, I gotta see if I can find if there was some biographical information on him here. So he studied music at the Queen's University. He has a master's degree, concentration in voice performance and music history. And he says, it's important to stress that all the historical information in this book is true. Well, almost all of it is true. There are some apocryphal stories that have arisen around the great composers, and we really have no way to know for sure if these things really happened or if they really said what people said they said. Anyway, so he goes on, he says, when Bach left Cothen, I don't think I'm pronouncing that right, for Leipzig, he really did have 11 linen shirts at the wash. If you don't believe me, you could look it up for yourself. Anyway, he tells the history. He starts out, although the ancient Greeks had a thing or two to say about music. And then the footnote says, Plato thought it was a pretty good idea, though with some reservations. And before that historic man probably hums some sort of mastodon hunting song as he set off from the cave each morning. Music history, as we know it, is usually said to have begun with Gregorian chant on the theory that it had to start somewhere, and it goes on like that. And so he talks about some of the earlier composers like Joaquin, Palestrina, and Gesualdo, who really wrote some crazy stuff. And then English composers, Baroque composers, classical. And he talks about the famous composers like Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven, Wagner, Brahms, Schubert, Schumann, the Russian composers, a ridiculously short history of opera, and the mess we're in now. He starts talking about the modern composers like Stravinsky and Schoenberg and Ives. Oh my goodness. If you ever listen to the music of Charles Ives, that's a real trip. Maybe we'll talk about him sometime down the road. And then where do we go from here? What's the future of music? So fun book, a really fun book. And in fact, I think I'm going to read it again because you do learn, you will learn music history. You won't learn everything there is to know about music history, but you'll learn some good stuff and you'll have some fun along the way. So if you've never studied music history, and I would encourage you to do that, this is an interesting and a very fun place to start. So I'll put it right up there again so you can see it. Bach, Beethoven, Bach. I always keep wanting to say Bach with a K, which I have been told, and it is correct, that is not the way to say his name. It's Bach, which is a sound that we don't normally make in England. I'm not in England. I'm in America. English. Anyway, let's see. We got some comments coming through, and this computer is so far away from me, and I'm so old and so blind. Greetings from Germany. Wow. From, I think that's Jan. Jan from Germany. Well, I know it's sorry I have to work. We'll never be sorry about having to work. My goodness, even I, a musician, have to work. These videos don't produce themselves. I'm a one-man show here. Anyway, that's what I've got for you today. I appreciate those of you who stuck around to watch this, and I know some of you are going to watch it on the replay when it gets posted to YouTube. Also, just a special thanks once again to those of you who have become patrons of At Home with Music. I don't have any sponsors. I hope to never have to do sponsorships. I don't want to be reading ads on my videos. No, I have nothing against those who do, because some of them, that's what they do. That's okay. They advertise some good stuff. But, and I've already had a few people reach out and want to do sponsorships, whatever. Probably not going to do it. If I can get enough patrons to support the work, then this channel will remain ad-free. And eventually, my hope is that I can turn off the YouTube ads, because that's, I do get some commission from YouTube when ads run. And unfortunately, I have no control over what ads are running. So don't blame me if you get an ad for something you really don't like. YouTube controls that, but it'd be great if someday I could turn those off as well and just have this channel be entirely ad-free and supported by my patrons. So those of you who have become patrons, I really appreciate it. I just want to say once again, thank you. I have a lot of things I want to do for the patrons. It's just a lot of work. I've created a monster for myself here, but going to keep plugging away. Now that we're recovering from the hurricane and getting back to normal, got a lot that I want to do. So if you have any other comments, if you're watching this after the fact, after the live stream, you can certainly leave those in the comment section. And anyway, thanks for watching, folks. Thank you so much. Appreciate all of you. Now it's time for me to get outside and start trimming rhododendrons and cleaning out gardening beds and sweeping up leaves and doing all kinds of stuff around the house. So, Lord willing, I'll be back next Saturday with another live stream, and we'll actually do some music related stuff. I've got some really interesting things that I want to talk about there, where I'll be set up like this. You'll be able to hear me play, and we'll have some fun together. All right. Talk to you all later. I got to reach over here and end the live stream.